and welcome to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Monday, October 13th, 2025. Welcome, Susan. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart. Welcome, Susan. How are you, young lady?
I'm well, thank you, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
And how are you,
Doing
Jeanie?
very well. We've got babies today, and
Yep.
means it's a sweet day.
Nice.
Extra sweet.
Nice.
So did you got to watch the video?
It's an excellent talk, Michael. It's really good.
I think that the reason why I wanted to chat with you after you listened to it was we were talking about, in the metaphor, blowing off the energy that's creating the disturbance in your hip, and I wanted to just reinforce on another level the whole idea of how creating the right conditions creates an increase in the flow of energy. It's a good example is if the conditions are right, that lightning comes down, strikes the ground, and whatever it strikes, it blows apart. But if the conditions aren't right, if there's enough moisture in the air, that lightning can't move through the air and strike whatever it strikes. That flow can't happen. And when Yeshua in what they call the Lord's Prayer, that's really about orienting and aligning ourselves, he's really talking about coming into that state of alignment, creating the right conditions for that connectedness and that energy flow to capture the presence of love and bring it into the world. And so I just wanted to reinforce that whole idea that alignment, everything on every level, mentally, emotionally, physically, which I meant to send you Patrick's phone number, by the way. I'll send that if you decide you want to do a session with him. But that every little tweak that can bring the conditions to be right for an increase in energy flow through that tissue is going to be what blows off the interfering energy and restores health.
I love it.
So holding the space that health is restored.
That would be great. I did go to the doctor, and he did say, well, you could do either thing. You could do nothing, or you could get a shot in the right in the socket there where he looked at the x-ray. There's, he said the kind of pain I'm having is typical, and you could put a shot right in there and see. It might last, the benefits might go for a week or two, or it might be you'll never need any help again. It'll just stop the inflammation and you'd be good to go. And it's unusual that most cases it may be 6 weeks or 6 months between shots. Well, I like that option, but I was thinking what you said about realigning the antenna, changing the energy flow, doing things differently. And John Sarno keeps coming to mind, and I'm thinking, what am I storing in there? And of course, you ask your hip what it's thinking, and most of your body will talk back to you, and it'll tell you what's on your mind, whether there's a direct connection or not. There probably is. So you've gotten the wheels turning toward looking at it. I've told, and the doctor also said I could have an operation. So I've put that off. I've been watching videos about what happens to people afterwards, and people are restricted. They can't do certain things ever again that they might have done before.
Yeah, you're so active.
I know. He said, for instance, Tim and I sleep on mattresses on the floor. We didn't buy a bed. We just didn't want to bother buying a bed. And I was delighted because you don't have to clean under mattresses. So I was thinking, here are these mattresses on the floor. And he said, well, you're going to have to get a bed. And I said, I don't.
Getting up and down?
Yeah. He said, you can't get up from the floor anymore. What? I get up.
That'd be pretty tough on your Pilates practice.
It would. So I'm not going to do that at this point.
Right.
And I've got an appointment to get the shot on Thursday. I'll
Awesome.
have to, I'll have to miss the radio show, but I I think I'd like to try that. But it's in addition to I've been doing a Buddhist meditation of relaxing and picturing light coming through the whole body. It's no different from what you're teaching, I don't think. Setting the antenna is what I'm trying to do.
Right.
And I might call Patrick or I might not, I don't know yet, because um, I'm still able to walk 4 miles a day without trouble. It's mainly when I move in certain ways,
Right.
it's really quite surprisingly painful. And I don't like it. But I was telling Tim Hayes on the previous hour, he always emphasizes, as you do, it's how we take situations that are presented to us that's what need attention or not. And this is a nuisance, but it's nothing like depression and anxiety. It's just a thing. It's like I was
Right.
saying to Tim, it's a doorknob that needs fixing or something.
Right.
So there isn't a lot of energy there. But of course, if there's the problem there, something's happening, something is happening. And you've been teaching us that. So I'm just looking at it. So thanks a lot. And that, again, that was a really wonderful talk, very well organized, and got people laughing over certain things. It was really good. So,
Well, one of my thoughts, or a couple of thoughts that I would add to the conversation is one, the fact that the steroid goes in and tends to reduce the inflammation, which makes room for blood flow, which is reparative.
mhm.
Uh, it it can tend to get an awareness of the tissue. So with what you're saying about, you move certain ways, I just, between now and Thursday when you get the shot, I really just pay attention to everything that tweaks it. And
Mhm.
then after Thursday, consciously, purposely stay away from those movements so that
Oh
you're
yeah.
not tweaking it and it has the time to perhaps, once the inflammation is reduced, which is going to naturally reduce the pain, then you're going to get blood flow. I don't know if you can retrieve your Avicen at this point. If you could, that would be very helpful in, especially with the if the inflammation is reduced, in getting blood flow in there. And when you get, the nutrients that are needed, the oxygen, nutrition, and such, then there's going to tend to be more of a capacity to repair
Mhm.
anything that has been damaged. So that'd be
And
my highest thoughts.
so I remember asking you once. I mean, my Avicen is still over at a friend's house, and she loves it. But I
Right.
could get it. But my question I asked before is, if you are exercising, is that the same as, are you getting oxygen that way? And you said yes. I don't know if there is a different, more information on that. I mean, maybe the Avicen does things that even exercise won't do. And if so, I'd be interested.
Yeah. My take would be, especially when exercise isn't opening this up,
Mm-hmm.
isn't getting enough blood flow, and isn't cleaning out the tissue space enough for it to recover, that the extra boost of the Avicen, I'd at least, if I understand you've got it loaned out, but if you had it for maybe a month and used it a couple of times a day, half an hour twice a day, it may just give enough of an extra boost to the blood flow and the blood vessels developing,
Mm.
that might just make the difference, might help to get over the hump.
All right, good idea. I'll speak to her about that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
If there are any extra wastes as a result of the injury, then getting that blood flow in there to clear the wastes out is a really important key to the tissue being able to rebuild and restore itself. And then, of course, adding to it the knowledge that the original vibratory pattern, you know, let me approach this from a different direction. Remember, we talked about the Delaware camera.
Yes.
You tune the camera to the frequency of an acorn. You take a picture of the acorn, and what develops on the photographic plate is an oak tree.
Mm-hmm.
How is that possible? Well, obviously, because the only thing you ever get when you plant an acorn is an oak tree. You never get a Volkswagen or a Cadillac or a rose bush or an orange tree. You always get an oak tree. The vibratory pattern is there.
Mm-hmm.
And the vibratory pattern that built your hip while you were in utero is still there.
Mm.
Perhaps there's something you've overlaid on that pattern that's helped to create the distortion. So I'd be asking, Rook, I'd be asking my breath to go in there. And if there is anything that you overlaid, bring it to awareness. And, the overlay is something, it may be something that was laid down when you were 2 years of age. It might have been, a tweak that happened while you were being in the delivery room, being delivered.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows what it is, but the perfect is never interfered with, but there can be overlays that affect the ongoing regeneration of the tissue, the ongoing rebuilding of those cells, because we know that every cell in the body replaces itself, depending whose numbers you take, between a year and 7 years, and they replace themselves with the patterned frequency that it was built with originally, unless there's an overlay on the pattern. So I'd be asking to be shown if there's anything that's overlaid, if there's anything that you need to forgive, that it allows it to come up. So and then visualize. It might be a good idea to get online and get a picture or several pictures of a hip uh, from the outside, the hip bone. I'm sure you can find online a hip and the socket and all of that, and just have that right there in front of you, the perfect, and the willingness to embrace anything that overlays it, so that when your body's, when that jolt of energy comes through that throws it off, you can go, oh, here it is, boom, I'll get rid of that one. And then the next generation of cells that come out perfect.
And you're
You
not
know,
talking about necessarily just a physical thing. You're talking about an overlay that might have been an emotional thing, right?
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, yes.
All right.
There's one story that I'm aware of, and this is medically documented. There've been a lot of miracles at Lourdes in France, where
Mm-hmm.
people get in the water, but. And if I remember correctly, of the thousands that have been proclaimed, the Catholic Church, who kind of oversees it, I think they've only affirmed about 60 miracles over the years, things
Mm-hmm.
they verified because they had medical documentation before and after that they verified as miracles. But one of them is a case where an Italian man who had cancer of the hip, literally, they had x-rays and he had no hip. It was gone. But
Wow.
he fervently knew, he was very devout, and he fervently knew if he could get in those waters, he would heal.
Mm.
And he came out with a perfectly formed hip.
Mm.
Now, how is that possible? Well, if we listen to Einstein on such things as matter, we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy. Energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There's no such thing as it, but there is a pattern vibration. And if it's interfered with, then the resultant tissue generation is going to be distorted. And if
Mm.
the distortion's removed, then the next generation of cells are perfect and rock on.
Michael,
So
it's just amazing to me that you were talking about this the way you were back then, and you've doubled back. And on another level, you're talking about it again, the antenna, the cranium, the moving of the
holy of
skull.
holies, it all fits.
God.
I way back, the man who started cranial-sacral therapy back
Mm-hmm.
half a century ago. He was a professor at the University of Michigan, and he ended up in Florida. And I studied with him way back 50 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it was interesting. Well, maybe it wasn't quite 50, more like 45 years ago. And I shared that with him way back then, and he kind of poo-pooed me, like crossed his fingers, like, "Ooh, you're crazy." But
Mm-hmm.
there are many practitioners today that I now have that conversation with. They go, Of course, of course. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it is literally every energy system has a means of capturing and bringing in the operative frequencies. And, my take is the bony structure of the so-called body is the core antenna. And when we align our mind, make sure that thought disorders are handled so that our emotions are aligned and our physiology are aligned with our human lives, then the manifestation, the expression of it's got to be the same. And you've heard me talk before. In the Aramaic language, the word manifest is obvious. If it's obvious to me that I'm going to be diseased for this reason, then I will manifest. If it's obvious that I'm going to be whole and healthy for this reason, then that is the only thing, the only frequency that can manifest, that can come into expression.
Mm.
So just, every bit of energy on every level, mental, emotional, physical, that you can bring into alignment. And you might even have a conversation with the doctor about asking him to affirm all of the wondrous things. Tell him you've already researched the side effects. You're not interested in hearing about them because you don't need that mind energy, but you're interested in him as an authority. And one of the things that happens in front of authority is the unconscious opens on a deeper level. So simply ask your physician, what I'd like you to do is tell me all the wonderful healing benefits that this is going to have, how it's going to repair blood vessels, and how it's going to repair bone, and how it's going to repair cartilage and rebuild, and ask for that.
Mm.
And you've got one more energetic factor coming into your mind for bringing that about in your form. And, remember those opening words in the book of John. Do not say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. They say, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh.
Mm.
It's mind energy that runs the system. Yes, if a so-called physical, something else resonating on the physical level comes in and gives it a whack and drives energy into it that doesn't belong, then yes, there's going to be a distortion in the so-called physical until that energy is removed. And the thing that removes that energy is when the conditions are right, when the energetic patterns are right and the energy is aligned. That's when that burst of energy can come through and throw off whatever has been influencing it toward degradation.
Hard to believe that chopping off the ball on the ball and socket and going and reaming out the socket and
Socket
putting
itself,
something
yeah.
artificial in and then putting in a titanium ball and a titanium shaft being shoved down between your thigh is going to
Yeah.
allow for real healing. But on the other hand, people say, whoa, I was good to go for another 20 years or whatever it was.
Yeah. I mean, the technology that they've developed is amazing, no question about it. And if you can do it by aligning yourself, then,
Why bother the other thing?
who
Right?
needs who needs to put out the $400,000 and go through the pain and trauma of it?
Um, And the cranial sacral therapy you're talking about, they manipulate the fissures, the connecting, like the when an infant's born, it's got a fontanelle that's open. Are they
Yes.
dealing with that connection when the
Most
skull? Go ahead.
most people think when the baby's soft spot hardens
Mm-hmm.
that the head is now fixed and solid.
Yeah. Right.
But if you look at the bony structure, go online and just look at a naked
Yeah.
skull,
You can
what you'll
see it.
see is sutures.
Yeah.
And those sutures are interlaced pieces of bone that are
Mm-hmm.
designed to be able to move.
Mm.
Now, some people in the medical profession will still tell you, yeah, but they don't move anymore. Well, that's just baloney. I mean, I've felt them move in hundreds of people over the years. Those bones are in continuous motion. And when you realize that the shape of an antenna determines the frequencies it receives, and you realize it, and it's not a big movement, it's maybe a millimeter or two, But when you look at what they call extension, when it's in its extension phase, it's one shape, which means it's one antenna bringing in certain frequencies. When you look at the opposite end, which they call flexion, then it's another antenna, totally, completely different frequency device, and everything in between. It's a whole self-adjusting antenna that brings in this complex of energies from that in which we live, move, and have our being. That's what it's designed for. And the Lord's Prayer, quote unquote, isn't a prayer. It's how to orient and align yourself, how to bring yourself into alignment so that you become, the Aramaic meaning of the word prayer, so you become a trap for God. That literally you are aligned in a way that you naturally capture this energy, this presence through which we live, move, and have our being, and bring it into the world. You hold a newborn that hasn't been physically or emotionally traumatized, they do a pretty good job of it.
Mm.
And if one has come through a life of trauma and drama and pain, and they start to do their work, there comes a point where instead of the kind of pain that just, what's his name? Most men live lives of quiet desperation. Instead of quiet desperation, because we live, move, and have our being in an energy field called love, we're designed to live in literally the physiological presence of love in our tissue structure 24/7, 365. But if we allow ourselves to go out of alignment, then we're not capturing that energy. They say, where did it go? About 24, 25 years ago, there was a couple who were medical doctors from Indianapolis, Indiana, actually a little town just north of Indianapolis, Noblesville. And they were married and they were doctors, and they came to an intensive at Heartland. I actually inherited one of their shirts. I don't even know where it is now, but they gave it to me. I liked the shirt so much, but they had on, when they arrived at Heartland, they had on matching T-shirts, and their T-shirts had a cartoon character sitting on some luggage. And the quote was, "If God isn't in your life, guess who left town?"
Mm.
So the task is to let God into that space. And the fact that at the instant of your birth, you were given a direct shared link with God called your breath. A live, moving energy and direct link to the Creator. And to let it in on deeper and deeper levels that's like the master lightning strike that blows off everything that doesn't belong. That makes sense?
It does. Of course, one thing leads to another. The fact that I'm so loving my life now and doing a project I'm loving doing, and my relationships with my kids, knock on wood, I feel as if I'm tempting the fates. Cancel that thought. And even the grandson, Jacob, who's had so much trouble, seems to be coming around
Yay. Well,
inch
you've been
by
holding the
inch.
space for it.
A lot of us have. But the thing is, so I've got this hip. What the heck? It's as if what am I doing? Am I shoving into the hip something that I'm refusing to look at? Or what? Why is this? It's just curious. You'd think I'd be running marathons the way life is. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, and let's face it, you've been circling the earth. You've shared on the show before, so I'm not telling stories out of school, for better than 8 decades, and you're still walking 4 miles an hour. So I'd say you're doing pretty well. And on one of those walks, I'd be visualizing that. Okay, my next step is what brings the energy through to throw off this overlay that doesn't belong.
Mm.
But the number of times you've circled the earth, especially with some of the history you've shared with us, um, a lot of those folks aren't even ambulatory, let alone walking 4 miles a day.
Well,
So I say congratulations to yourself, and I'm open to guidance as to what needs to move for this to disappear. You've moved
Yeah.
some other pretty heavy duty mountains in the last 5 years on this show.
Thank God. Thank you. Thank you for this is like my soul oasis. The 2 hours of radio shows. Fantastic.
Well, we'll hold the space that, each step you take, this might be a mantra to kind of engage in. I know you've done mantras in the past of
Mhm.
each step I take brings me into deeper alignment and health, especially through my hips.
Okay, I'll do it.
Yay.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Michael.
And delighted to hear that things are shifting with Jacob. And it's really sweet that Luke is in the space he's in from,
Yeah,
because you did a worksheet with him, how long ago? 6 years ago, 7 years ago now? Something like that.
it was somewhere in there. He was in very bad shape. It was like a pivotal wake up sheet.
One of those
And
aha moments. It's always, I have one of those for me. There was one time when I had a conflict going with someone and I had it all figured out how it was all their fault. And instead of explaining to them, why it was all their fault, I stopped and I did a worksheet. And literally, like, this is kind of like one of those peak moments for me. I still go back to remembering that because literally 30 seconds after the worksheet, I couldn't even remember how I imagined it was about them.
yeah,
It was so clear to me that this was mine.
yeah,
So, having that kind of a moment is definitely inspiration.
it's amazing.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool that you were able to do that for Luke. And that he's out there helping people with their healing and freeing
Hmm.
themselves of alcohol. And I mean, that's just
Yeah, he's doing really good work, and he's singing in a
monumental.
band, and he's fantastic. He's a guitarist, terrific guitarist. Got these gigs. My daughter sends me clips of him playing here and there, and it's great. I'm
And where
glad
is
to.
he now?
He's in Jacksonville, Florida, not far from
Jacksonville.
where his mother and her husband are living.
Right.
And they're in good touch.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you,
Awesome.
Michael. Well, carry on. I've been
All
half an
right.
hour's gone by. Thanks for the
Hey,
consult.
all right. Blessings. Appreciate you.
Thanks. Thanks. You
Yeah.
too.
Lots of love.
Well, we had a question from Shawn and Kayla, but they're on the show, so I wonder if they can unmute and ask it themselves.
Want to do it live? Sure. That'd be
Yeah.
cool. What do you think, Shawn? Kayla, you guys got a question for me? A thought?
Hey
An
y'all.
answer? Hey.
So we got in from Meemaws for the third day in a row, and I'm listening to the show. She's in the kitchen. I yelled for her.
We could make
So
up a song about that.
yeah, it
Someone's
sounds
in the
like
kitchen
fun.
with Kayla. So
I sing to her sometimes. She says, "Babe, that's cute," and then moves on. But no, listening to the show, it's just like, am I live right now? Because you guys are literally talking about everything we discussed in the morning on the way out there yesterday.
oh, really?
Yeah, and
Powerful
so
vibration.
we're going down the road. I mean, what do you call it? Do you say it's the
Law of
universe?
resonance.
God, the Father. I mean, who? Because it's all opening up, right? Like, no pun intended.
Yes.
So go down the road, and I look over and I say, "Babe, you got a headache?" And she says, "No, I'm calming my brain down." And I said, "Okay, that's interesting." And she says, "You know how babies have holes in their head when they're a soft spot when they're born?" I said, "Yeah." And anyhow, we had like a whole 10-minute conversation
Was
about,
she feeling her
you know,
sutures moving?
yeah, she said that she felt calm after that, but no crunching. Right? No crunching.
Well, my take is that when we're in a state of misalignment And I'm experiencing this more and more personally on a daily basis in terms of my own process. Since I started I do at least an hour and sometimes 3 hours of still point breathing every morning. And
Wow.
that has become so profoundly obvious. And it's like shifting from the constructs of the mind perception into revelation, i.e., instead of being locked into what's going on in my carbon-based memory, the generational patterns from the past, or what has been referred to as the desert, where most people spend their first 40 years or so, what I've been experiencing, and I've been advising people more and more, and this is something new for me in the last year, to pay attention every time that there's a pulse that starts to move in the body, especially in the head, because that's a result of a higher state of alignment. And when we go into that higher state of alignment, there's a whole new realm of information comes in with that pulse. That pulse is information. And if we're paying attention now, most of the world goes, "Oh, well, I'm too busy. I got to rush off here. But if you take the time and are with it, the pulse is there. And in that pulse, when you allow it, like Susan, I'd suggest you invite the pulse to come into your hip, because that's what will go in and rebuild your hip. When I was a kid, I had a bike accident and had a traumatic brain injury. And I don't know how long ago, a couple months ago, I went through about 3 mornings where that pulse started in one part of my brain and literally went through every centimeter of my brain systematically. And I could feel the rebuilding process that was taking place on a tissue level. So each time we come into that higher state of alignment, each time we take a load off of the tissue structure, instead of basing this, for those who maybe haven't tapped into this information before, there's some Harvard research that we use as one of the foundations of this work, and this goes back to the 1950s, and the research has never been refuted. It's the most quoted research in psychological history. But what they determined was, in a time frame where, when they had people's heads hooked up to electrodes, they could measure 10,000 brain cell firings, the max amount of data that became available was 9 bits. It's actually, the lab stats were 7 plus or minus 2, as little as 5 bits of data, as much as 9 bits of data. The person who would have 5 bits of data, we'd say they're kind of slow mentally. The person who has 9, we say they're the genius. And so most of us live in that mind, which was called the mind of man. Actually, Yeshua referred to it. You'll remember a guy named John the Baptist, and the metaphor, or the Aramaic words that he used to describe the fact that the genius that John the Baptist was, is he said, and basically he was describing the fact that John the Baptist lived out of carbon-based memory, but tweaked, healed, high level, like, man, he's rocking in his carbon-based memory. So he says, John the Baptist, the highest of those born of woman. He's saying, coming from carbon-based memory, if you're functioning out of your 9-bit mind, everybody would look at John and go, wow, look, he's a genius. Wow, let's follow him. And then he says, but he's the lowest in the kingdom. And since I've started doing this daily still point practice, rather than jumping up and running off and getting busy and getting everything done, what I realized is that when we can let go of the anomalies in carbon-based memory, the hostility, the fear, from the Aramaic, the sin, the energies that are off the mark, then we literally, there is, in around, and I'm saying this from my own experiences, feeling where the uplink is in the area of the corpus callosum. link in, and then we have available information from the actuality.
I
And
mentioned
it's
that
been
yesterday.
estimated, yeah,
Yep.
it's been estimated that in the time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, 9 bits of information come into conscious awareness, that the actuality perhaps has some 20 trillion bits of information available. And in the context of what they were trying to get across to people who didn't have the brain cells for it, what they were saying was, you've got inside of you've got an uplink to what's the 20 trillion bit world, the mind of Christ. You got God's mind available to you. If you settle for what John had, and he has the highest, that's great. But he's like the very lowest when it comes to stepping into the uplink and starting to function out of that mind. And it's available to all of us, and it's physiological, and it's right inside of us. And when we live in the 9-bit mind, i.e., the mind of those born of woman, we have this little tiny bit of data, and it is a reflection of everything held in carbon-based memory. Carbon-based memory, if you took your body into a lab and had a lab break down the chemicals that are there, the atoms and electrons, protons, neutrons, etc., they tell you that the primary atomic structure that your so-called body is made up of is carbon. And a carbon atom has 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and stores everything that happens to it energetically. And it's the number of that which goes against connecting to that other mind. They call it the kingdom of heaven. They call it the mind of Christ. It's the actuality. And when we're in the actuality, we're directly in what is actually happening in the moment, rather than the mind, rather than carbon-based memory's interpretation of it, rather than generational patterns and interpretations. It was called the mind of Christ. And if something traumatic comes up in the body's mind in carbon-based memory, then that's what mitigates against being in the mind of Christ, in the actuality. And that was called the Antichrist, 666. It has a number. It's carbon. And we're designed to be connected. Yeah, we've got a carbon-based device, but we're designed to get our data, that 9-bit space that we've got to write information. We're designed to get our data from the 20 trillion bit actuality, which was called the kingdom of heaven or the mind of Christ, rather than being limited to this little 9-bit or this, carbon device that has the past stored in it, generational patterns. The Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years was not about a hot, sandy place. It was about living in the unconscious, in carbon-based memory. And the average person spends the first 40 years or so in that desert. And then what do they have to do to get out of the desert? The old generation had to adopt all of the causes, all of the energetic patterns based in hostility or fear, sin, had to be removed. And then the uplink becomes, oh, well, of course, there it is. Just plug into it. It's the most natural thing to do. But not if there's all kind of rage and guilt and fear and drama that people aren't willing to face and deal with.
Right. Yep. Aside from, now, stop me if I'm getting too far ahead. Aside from tuning the antenna for, what would you call it? Healing, realigning to love, to original creation.
Well, my take would be forgiving the energetic patch. When they said to get out of the desert, the old generation has to die off. The root of the word generation is generaria, means cause. It didn't mean everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. Every
Right.
cause, every energetic pattern that physically or emotionally traumatized the antenna so that it was thrown out of shape had to be removed so it could be restored to its natural state. And it's the most natural thing there is for us to be plugged into that uplink to the mind of Christ, to the actuality, to the kingdom of heaven, the community of love. Actually, if you translate those words from the Aramaic, it's the community of love. It's the most natural thing in the world. That's why worldly leaders make sure that people are locked into drama and trauma, suffering, and pain.
Right. I think it has something to do, even if you look at other world power religions, whether it be Buddhism, Hinduism, even Islam, and a few others, they all seem to carry, when you look at them in their core ideas, they all seem to carry an idea that it's all dealing with the mind. Uh, Allegorically, there are things
Say it
outside
again.
of
I didn't quite catch your words. Say that again. It's all.
um, the ancient writings. It's pointing towards the inward being, pointing toward your mind, the human mind. And so,
Well,
even if
I
you
go ahead.
so even if you have something written like in Job about Leviathan, yes, there may have been a fire-breathing dragon out there somewhere. However, just like in the book of the Revelation, the beast, the seven-headed beast, that's a type of the unregenerated mind. And so you have a lot of religions that will deal with this. And I just made a kind of a connection. You mentioned about John the Baptist. That's the best that man can do in their limited state,
Exactly.
in their higher vibrations, if you will. But why is it that only the Christ mind seems to stick or seems to be a permanent fix or permanent healing? Well, because it's outside of just what you have locally in the local mind. And you have your antenna tuned or adjusted, you swing that beam around and you aim it towards source, and all of a sudden you're connected. And just like what you say, you can have healings in physiology, physical healings, but most of the time we see miracles happening in healing past hurt, trauma, pain, disgust. And but that's I hadn't realized that up to this point. You have a contrast of John the Baptist and you have Christ, the Christ mind.
Right.
And I've always sort of wondered, why is it other religions, they can get so close but never take that bridge over to the other side. And that's the corpus callosum, going from the left brain to the right brain, that you were speaking about earlier, the Christ mind. So thanks for bringing that up.
It's literally where the uplink is, in
Yeah.
my experience.
Yeah, I think you're onto something for sure.
And that space, what I experienced, and why the breath is so important, why Ruka Dakucha, the shared breath that was given to us at the moment of our birth, is so important. In Aramaic, that Ruka Dakucha is the live presence of the active energy of the creator that undoes the effects of our errors, undoes whatever quote unquote sin. Again, nothing to do with a
But
Greek word. It's simply an archery term that means off the mark, that it
allow me to jump
undoes.
in. We know what you mean about when we say sin, or when there's error, but are you talking about when we make a physical mistake, when we do something wrong that the church would say is a sin?
Yes, in Aramaic, the word sin literally came from the archery ranges. If you were on the archery range and you fired your arrow and you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper would simply yell sin. You're off the mark. If you missed the target altogether, the scorekeeper would yell evil. Like you missed the target. That's all it means.
So if
And
we see,
so,
go ahead.
so if we're carrying an energy that's off the mark,
Yeah.
the uplink, it's like when they talked, and I brought this forward a couple of weeks ago on the show, they talked about the Holy of Holies and they made it about a a wooden building that they built. It was fancy and it was going to contain God. And of course, the scriptures talk about, don't you know that you're the temple of the Creator? That's what we're designed for. So everything they said about the temple and the Holy of Holies and the high priest, and the high priest had to be without sin. You know, we couldn't have a mar in his body or an injury, or he couldn't be the high priest. And he could only go into that place when he was totally devout and freed. And my offering is that when we're holding to those energetic patterns that maybe are 100 generations old in us, it's like those patterns of sin energy are like a bar to the plugging in the uplink to that higher mind. And when the breath is used properly, Ruka she who undoes the effects of our errors, and you know, the translation for years that I worked with from the Aramaic, 25 of the world's top parameters, was undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. But when I had this direct experience, that was transformed for me. Yes, she undoes the effect of errors. Using the breath allows all of the energy of sin to be quelled in us. Doesn't mean we're finished with our work. Doesn't mean there aren't more energies that we're going to have to deal with. But at a given moment, all of those energies are quelled. Now you become the high priest and you can enter the Holy of Holies and you can uplink. But you can't get in there while you're carrying hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, drama, trauma, blame, hatred, vengeance. You can't get into that space. That was my experience. This just happened for me just a couple of weeks ago. I was like, oh my God, revelation. And so now what I realize is, so we either live in the constructs, the perceptions of carbon-based memory, the replicate mind that just, you know, a situation occurs. Well, what have you got in storage? Well, one person's got hate about this, and so this person looks at that situation and what that terrible thing that person did. They go, I hate you. Somebody else has got fear about that situation in their carbon-based memory, and so they look at the event that happened. They say, oh, I'm afraid of you, and somebody else is, oh, I have sadness about it, and everybody's replicating whatever's gone on in their generations, the sin that they haven't dealt with. And carrying that, you can't find the uplink. Breathing dissolves those energies, and zero active sin energy at a given moment, and we can enter that place and uplink, connect to it. And in that, you know, if you're looking at a 9-bit mind and you're looking at a 20 trillion bit world, the 20 trillion bit world is pure revelation. The 9-bit mind is pure replication. And that's why forgiveness becomes so important, to yield up, to weaken, to free yourself of what's going on in your generation. So what's going on in the carbon-based memory, what the scriptures talk about the mind of man, and Yeshua defined the mind of man as Satan. You know, that story of Peter, he's got the sword. He's going after the high priest servant. Yeshua's just come out from doing a monstrous piece of work in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's fully connected, and he goes to Pete. He says, like, Peter, you know, put that sword away. If you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. And then he describes what, and he addresses Peter directly as Satan. And he says, for you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God. You're linked up to your carbon-based memory. That's all you have available to you. That's all that can write in that screen of awareness that's just got room for 9 bits. Clear it out, forgive it, collapse it, hit the uplink, and now you've got revelation. You've got it coming from the 20 trillion bit world, direct from the actuality. And that living from direct from the actuality was called the mind of Christ. So they were talking about literal mental, emotional, and physiological capabilities. It was nothing to do with religion. And the whole original idea of the priesthood was to support people being able to do that. But, if you have person after person after person after person after person that comes to you and you give them the uplink and they walk away and it's like, okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah.
But if you can hook people on sacrifice and suffering, you listen to the scriptures and they talk about this whole idea of sacrifice, and the Creator slips in there and says, I can't even stand the smell of the blood of your bulls. I don't want your sacrifice. But, the priests and their family had to eat, and there wasn't a very abundant food supply there. So what happened? Well, you sacrifice that. It's required. Why is it required? Because the priests need to eat. Their families need to eat.
Right.
And then, of course, instead of, a lot of people look at the cross and, oh, you suffering, that's it. No, Yeshua turned to the high priest servant, totally connected as a human being, connected to the actuality, living in and as the presence of love, and did what a human would do and reached out and brought healing to the high priest servant, the man who's going to have him mercilessly slaughtered. And I mean, people say, well, Michael, that's an interesting interpretation. But did you notice that doing that got him dead? And I say to that person, yes, I noticed doing that got him dead. Did you notice they couldn't keep him that way? That's what he came to demonstrate. If you stay connected to what he called my Father, the mind I'm connected to, the actuality, then you now have the power of creation behind you. If you're stuck in carbon-based memory, you're dead. And out of carbon-based memory, the dead lead the dead and the blind lead the blind. So rather than demonstrating the power of suffering, which so many people, I mean, there are people out there, every Easter, they're out there hauling crosses around. Yeshua never said, haul my cross. He said, take up yours. What is it that's in you, the energy that's off the mark that's in you that keeps you from the uplink? Handle that, deal with that. And so he demonstrates what a human life is with the man who's going to have mercilessly slaughtered. And he demonstrates the power of living as a human being, a true human being, rather than trapped in past in the mind of man. And that's exactly what he said to Peter. He calls Peter Satan, for you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God. You're not hooked up to the uplink. I mean, it's just, and so the priests made it about suffering because, hey, if everybody's doing sacrifice, they got a food supply, and everybody's doing suffering, they got control of their money, their political vote, and their genitals. Because, of course, if they're the only one who has a salve for the suffering, then you got to stay hooked into it. And so in the name of a book that at least 300 plus times says, fear not, we have those who are hooked into the suffering and sacrifice game saying, oh, but fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. In the name of a book that over 300 times says, fear not, but now we're going to have wisdom by fearing God. I mean, it's silly on its face, but millions of people have bought it for too long. So breathing with you. It's key. It's key. There's no passage in the Aramaic about the denial of the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. The Holy Spirit, which Aramaic is Ruka Takuja, nothing about a disembodied spirit being. Ruka Takuja is your breath. And it's the breath that dissolves the energies that are off the mark in you. The denial of the power that dissolves and causes forgiveness to occur in us, because it's only the Creator that knows how to move that energy. We have a part in the process, but the Creator's the one who alleviates or frees us of the energy. Deny that, which is literally your breath, and you're not committing the unforgivable sin, you're now living in unforgiveness because you're not allowing the power that will move the energy to move in you. And you watch most people when they're in their drama and trauma, what are they doing? Their breath is totally locked down. Most people subventilate most of their lives. They're holding their breath all the time. That literally in Aramaic would be the denial of the Holy Spirit. This is immanent physiology. This isn't theology. This isn't about some external temple out there. It's about our own process.
Right.
So I'm with you 100% on that one.
Yeah. If I made a link to something, if you're open to it.
Please.
So the phrase effects of errors, or the effects of our errors. Of course, we can break that down, have a whole show just on that. But I link that with an overreaction to something typically that came from the external, something we saw and didn't perceive correctly, like our filter was not set correctly.
Right. Rockman is inactive.
Mm-hmm. And we witness something, and we build into our worldview something that is off the mark. That's kind of how I view that. It's not so much external, but it's all
it's all an inside job.
Yeah, inside job.
All of the energetic patterns that are out of alignment with love that we carry in us from the generations. There's the desert. What had to happen to get out of the desert? The old generation had to die off. Not everybody in old physical bodies, but the causes inherited from the generations of those perceptions that you're talking about have to be forgiven.
Right. Had nothing to do with a bunch of people who could navigate the stars.
Exactly. Yeah. In a 35 square mile area. Yeah. Had nothing to do with a hot, sandy place. But it's physiology.
Yeah.
It's immanent. It's where we live. And our antenna has to move properly to receive the energies that make it possible.
That's daily life.
Yep.
That should be daily life.
Exactly.
Renewing our mind daily, fixing our perception. Yeah.
Exactly. And of course, the core tool there is forgiveness. That's
you
what.
You mean it's not all those other people out there?
Yeah, them, the ominous them. If only they'd be different.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Yeah. Any woman, any other thoughts for you, sir?
Well, so how do you handle a person who understands things about cranial adjustment, but they yet refuse to see emotions are generated from within? Because I want my cake and eat it too,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to choose one or the other, right? Why not fix the whole person?
Well, we've developed a test in this work for determining whether or not something you're feeling is yours or not. And it's it's a difficult test to work through, but it can be done. And the way you tell that you're the one who's feeling it, or pardon me, the way you tell whether it's yours or not is, are you feeling it?
Right.
If you're feeling it, it belongs to you. You'll notice, and there's another easy test. Let's say there's this event that happens in the room. There are 20 people in the room, and there's this terrible event that happens in the room. And everybody looks and everybody agrees it's a terrible event. And one person's feeling the emotion of rage. Another person's feeling the emotion of sadness. Another person's feeling the emotion of fear. Another one's feeling hatred. Another one's feeling vengeance. And everybody says, I'm feeling this because of them. It's like, well, no, if you were feeling it because of them, all 20 people in the room would be feeling the same thing. The event triggered something in each individual, and the individual who lives in denial, and one of the main focal points of this work is understanding what denial is. Whenever I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, then I live in denial of that. And when I live in denial, I dissociate from that. When I say, you made me mad, What I'm in essence saying to my mind is, mind, you are not allowed to show me that I'm involved in my anger. I want you to hallucinate for me a reality, a construct that they're the cause of it. And because the mind turns thoughts into pictures, I'll actually see that they're the cause of it. And to do that, I have to dissociate from the very creative power in me that's causing that in the first place. And once I dissociate from it, I will literally set up, and this is measurable energies in the laboratory, that dissociated energy, because I've pushed it down, is now intensified. And everything that's intensified in me literally sets up actual measurable high energy waves that leave my mind when I think a thought. And that resonating wave is what's going to draw into my life the why is this happening to me again experience. And until I collapse the projection that they make me feel this way, and the way you do that is you recognize that every time you felt that, there's a goal you've held for somebody, whoever it is you're blaming. When you locate the precise goal, and this in Aramaic is called forgiveness, you cancel that goal, then the pained perception, the projected perception, collapses in on itself. Now, if you breathe, you've got access to the hidden part of your own mind. And that's where the forgiveness process takes place. When you take the breath to that, then it's alleviated. But in hiding, it can never be alleviated. That's what leads or led the psychiatrist, and this is a guy I would have loved to have spent some real time with. Carl Jung says, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. And he goes on to say, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that's, go look at the world. All the wars, all the fights, all the arguments, all the divorce, all the hatred, all the vengeance, it's all got to do with people who are living in denial, i.e. they think and speak as though something outside of them is the cause of what's moving in them. And because they do that, their mind goes, okay, I'll show you that's the way it is. But I'll only see that because the mind takes my thoughts and turns them into pictures. The same way, if I go and look at the TV antenna, I can't cut the wires coming from my antenna. I'll never find a picture in there. There are frequencies in there that enter the TV, and there's a converter mechanism that converts the frequency of the pictures, the information contained in the signal, into pictures and sound. Well, that's exactly the same thing inside of us. Our minds convert our thoughts, the information, into pictures. So as long as I hold the thought, no, it's all their fault. I have nothing. No, yeah, I have been through this 87 different times with 42 different people, but it's all their fault, all 42 of them. Well, as long as you hold that thought, your mind will show you that's true. But if you start to apply forgiveness, you'll find you'll be freed of whatever that traumatic emotion is.
And that's being stuck like a blockage.
Say it again.
And that's being stuck like a blockage.
Yeah, basically, it's called. If you go to the scriptures, it says one of the things you got to do is honor truth. And what most people do is honor their mind's lies. The mind presents a picture, a lie. It's all their fault. Yeah, I've been through it 87 different times with 42 different people, but it's all their fault. So the mind presents a lie, and they call that lie truth. And because the mind can only contain a max of 9 bits of data, when they call the lie truth, truth bounces off. There's no room for it to get in. When you start applying forgiveness and collapsing what's filled the 9-bit mind, then there's room for truth in the mind of Christ to start writing truth in your mind, rather than carbon-based memory and the generational beliefs writing in your mind. That's the difference between living in perception and revelation.
Yeah.
And we're designed to live in revelation. But we evolved through perception.
Yes, sir. Or devolve.
Evolved, yes. Physiology evolved. There is an evolutionary process that happened in physiology. And it came through a pretty tough time. And so until one starts to recognize, oh yes, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people. Maybe it's about me. Let me investigate. and then starts to use the tools, then it becomes obvious. It's like, oh my God, what have I been doing to myself?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being with us. Thank you for your thoughts and questions. And we're at 2:07, so I'm going to just say, everybody, appreciate you being with us. Have the best year of your eternal life. It's an awesome